Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Bullpen. In the Bullpen today, we have Satyajeet Marar, research associate of the Center for Independent Studies, technology writer, and policy analyst. Good day, welcome.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to talk about, let's start with immigration policy. I don't want to presume what you believe or what you have analyzed in your policy studies. So what are your thoughts about immigration policy in the United States of America?
Well, as a foreign national who spent a year and a half in the United States, I think that skilled immigration is a big part of what makes the US a successful and thriving nation. And I think one of the beautiful things about the US is this idea about embracing people from all around the world, regardless of what their origin is. When I was in the US, it didn't matter where I was from. It didn't matter that I speak with a funny cadence. What mattered is what I brought to the table. And I think having a policy that reflects that is what is America's advantage. The best and brightest from everywhere. And the cold, huddled masses who yearn for freedom, giving them a home where they can go out and, reflect those aspirations.
I think that's very well said. What are your thoughts about some of the more conservative leaning policies that basically are antithetical to the connection and the immigration connection to others around the world? It's a very exclusionary doctrine.
Yeah, I think sometimes it does veer into that territory. I think there needs to be a nuanced discussion about immigration when you talk about the form it takes, legal versus versus what they call undocumented immigration. I would love to see a world where the US accepts just as many immigrants as it currently does, but is able to have an efficient and quick pathway for refugees, who are fleeing persecution, and for people who want to pursue economic opportunities, because it's only ever, been to America's benefit at the end of the day. And look, as an Australian, to be honest with you, it is in my, in Australia's interest for America to be strong and prosperous, because you guys are our security partner in a world where we see, less liberal societies like the People's Republic of China coming up. And I think if America is unable to continue attracting the best and brightest people, regardless of the national origin, I think their ability, your ability to compete with the likes of, a rising China, less liberal societies is going to, be at risk.
That's really interesting. And you're talking about the attraction model, which I agree with you on that as well. It strengthens the overall fortitude of our power and our might, right? So it's a good thing in the workforce, it's a good thing with training, it's a good thing in the educational sector, but it's also a good thing in the labor market. So let me read something. And this comes from the Congressional Budget Office. People will make the argument that somehow undocumented immigrants take away from this country more than they give back. They would just say that without any context. You're a policy guy, I'm a policy guy. They never researched it. They don't have a statistic. They don't have a source. They just say it because they assume it. So let me read something from the CBO. According to the CBO, undocumented immigrants pay a lot of money in taxes. One of about 6 million, this guy named Arturo was one in about 6 million who actually pay taxes annually. Now, that means, and this is just talking about undocumented workers from Mexico. So the data was itemized. So out of Mexico, 6 million individuals who are undocumented actually pay taxes, and they pay taxes to things they will never benefit from. So they're not utilizing those services. So let me break it down a little more. The report from the CBO shows that 50% to 75% of undocumented immigrants pay billions in taxes each year and have been doing so since the Internal Revenue Service created a program that allow people without a social security number to file taxes. So literally, you have this just one segmented program being able to bring in billions of dollars, and you've never heard anyone make that argument on the other side. There's another report that came out that roughly 30% of the current workforce, it is an immigrant or undocumented workforce. You have that higher in some states like Arizona and others. You would tremendously damage that economy if you did a roundup and told everybody they have to go to their country of origin. And over 80% of individuals that come to the country undocumented come to work. The same federal law that says it's illegal to work undocumented, the subsection of that law says it's illegal to hire them. But you never see the hiring managers or the CEOs being handcuffed and taken to jail and prosecuted. Only the people trying to actually make an honest living. So when you look at all of this from a policy context, why do you think this has become a political partisan issue rather than let's get to the root of it, let's resolve it, and let's make sure we can have a robust policy moving forward?
Look, I think when it comes to topics like immigration, there's certainly motive pull for people going one way or the other. Now, the raw data might say one thing and might confirm that it's a net benefit for everyone. But people look around them, they step outside and they think, well, my neighborhood looks really different to what it was 20 years ago. It doesn't feel like I'm living in the same place anymore. And they just get an inherent feeling, like that something has changed and they're losing control. And it's very easy for politicians and for polemists to really appeal to these sorts of emotions in a strong way. The other point is, when someone is going through a genuine struggle, they're struggling to find a job, they're struggling to find work. It's easy to find a scapegoat. You got Schrodinger's immigrant who is somehow stealing your benefits by relying on the welfare state that should be benefiting citizens first, but also stealing your job at the same time. I mean, which one is it really? It really is hard to ultimately, take on these issues. But the more that we can have debate based on fact and figures, the more that we can have an honest discussion about the direction of policy that the country should be taking.
It should be a policy first agenda. So on Indisputable, we have a policy first agenda here. We lead with the policy, politics be damned. And here's what the policy says. Here's what the statistics say. If you're making an argument about undocumented workers taking jobs, if that's your context, meaning you care about American jobs, if you actually care about American jobs, automation kills American jobs more so than any other format in America is automation. And then corporations trying to increase their bottom line by not investing in human capital that also gets rid of American jobs more so than anything else, and outsourcing gets rid of American jobs as well. So I don't understand the conversation or the debate if they're not also debating these other nuances that are connected and more massively so to job loss in America. And literally you have a program, a system set up in this country where those who are undocumented give a net economic positive to the country rather than create a net negative.
Sure, and I think one of the key factors behind that is that when you hear economic arguments made by people who are anti-immigration or specifically anti-undocumented immigration, it's sometimes a foil for really, social conservative arguments. And they can certainly make those arguments. They can make the argument, I believe in free speech. If they want to argue that America has an aggregate character that they want to preserve for whatever reason, they should make that argument honestly and openly. They should say that this is what I want America to look like. I personally feel insecure that America is looking different to what I think it should look like, rather than trying to cover up with this fake foil about it being an economic argument. Because the economics all support a robust and strong immigration system. It's what built this country in the end. And the fact is that if this country doesn't have a healthy supply of workers coming in, not only do skilled immigrants give a lot more back to the economy than they take away, but their children end up being raised in the new country and supplementing the local fertility rates. And this is going to end up paying for everyone's social security, everyone's pensions, especially considering that in most of the Western world, including Australia, including the US, fertility rates are going down. So who's going to be able to pay that bill? So again, a frank conversation is what we need to have.
And see, that's exactly the point, brother, what you just said. This is not about an economic argument. They use that as a false pretext to disguise their real motive. This is literally about keeping America white and privileged. That's what it really is about. It's about that power, that dominance of a societal structure, a normality that they see being chipped away at. And they will use these arguments as a distraction when the truth is a policy argument doesn't stand up in their favor. It actually opposes them if they tried to have a policy debate. So they don't bother with those debates. They bother with classism. They want to create friction between certain demographics using talking points rather than policy, facts, and science to do so. You're in a unique situation because what you do is really not a partisan thing. What you do is literally a policy thing. But you often, I'm sure, find yourself in political conversations. How do you navigate the political waters here, man? Because Democrats aren't all the way right, but damn, man, Republicans seem to be all the way wrong on a lot of this stuff.
I think you'll find a broad cross-section of Republicans, especially on things like immigration policy. I know it's harder to believe nowadays because the Trump faction or brand of Republicanism is quite strongly against. Well, he claimed he was against illegal immigration, but then he spent most of his term appointing people who are against legal immigration.
Right.
And to be totally honest with you, I made a lot of friends during my time in DC, including strong Trump supporters who, they like me personally. Because we shared some conservative leaning opinions in common, even though we disagreed on other ones. And look, I'm going to give you a little bit of pushback here. I think for many of these people strongly, about controlling immigration, it's less about skin color or the way society looks superficially. It's in their mind, rightly or wrongly, it's about this idea of values, about national character. And this belief that if there isn't control over the immigration intake, then there isn't control over what values everyone shares. But look, if you want the people coming into America to embrace the idea of being American, you have to give them something to aspire to. You have to give them something that's able to include them and have them as part of the national fabric. And that includes being able to maintain aspects of their heritage while they become more American over time. I can tell you that, my family moved to Australia from India. And one of the beautiful things about Australia, as opposed to say a place like Dubai or Singapore, Dubai is probably a better example of this, is that you are actively encouraged to become Australian. And in America, you're actively encouraged to become American. But if you're telling the immigrants coming in, we don't, we're a bit skeptical about people who look like you, I think that sends the opposite message. It's actually going to backfire in a big way. The vast majority of immigrants want to build a great new home in their new country. And they're going to be most successful at doing that in a more inclusive and accepting environment.
Yeah, on that point, I completely disagree with you. I completely disagree that race is not at the core of the cultural matrix that we're talking about, because white nationalism has been something that this country was founded upon. The DNA structure of this country was founded upon the idea that white people, white men in particular, were superior to anyone else. And the DNA of that country is still present and prevalent in our systems, rules, ordinances, statutes, and even in how we carry out our norms, our societal norms. So I don't think you get away from that. Now, are there some people who would walk around and claim, listen, I'm not racist, I don't have a racist bone in my body? And they would probably even pass a lie detector test if you were to sit them down and strap them into a lie detector test. But here's the reality, their bias comes out in their decisions. We call it implicit bias, where they will say, oh, I'm not hyper aggressive racist, but they have these biases that play out. And let me bring you to another point. Race identity is still very strong in this country. Race identity is still real in the United States of America. And if you're talking about a value system, here's what I hear when you say that. I hear assimilation. That's what I hear. That should not be the goal. If we are truly a country that celebrates the diversity of each other, remember, the great experiment of America in a mature democracy is an America that actually celebrates, not tolerates, not is biased against the diversity and the differences that others may bring, right? But what we see is the concept that you talked about just now. People are saying, we want you to share the American value system. Well, that cannot be defined by some monolithic reality. That cannot be defined by somebody arbitrarily setting that value system for you. Because we are all an expression of 3 E's, brother. Experiences, exposures, and environments. That's it. Nothing else, nothing more. So if you have a set of 3 E's different than the person next door to you, you will have a different value structure. And if you're telling me that my value system is not part or connected to the American value system, you are in fact devaluing me and my experiences, exposures, and environments. But what you're really talking about is this need for the white male dominated white supremacist culture to say everybody needs to think like us. That is in fact a simulation. That's not celebrating diversity. That's not just adhering to a value system. That's saying we literally want you to think the way we think about everything.
Look, that wasn't quite what I was angling at. Now, America was founded broadly, if you had to pick one ideology that underpinned America, it's liberalism. It's liberal democracy, really. It's the fact that this is one of the only major ideology in recent history that has allowed for the integration of people with widely different individual perspective, experiences, and values in the one country. And what's interesting is, this value system was celebrated even at a time when it had a racist basis. We've read what the founding fathers have had to say about race, and some of them have said things that are completely not pretty whatsoever.
Yeah, but let me just, and I hate to interrupt you, brother, but those who were enslaved, they weren't celebrating that.
You're right, you're absolutely right, and I'm not trying to wash away any of that. What I simply mean to say is, for us to have a country, for America to have a country today that incorporates people from many different values and backgrounds in the one country, there are certain things that it's good to have in common: respect for free speech, right. Respect for the rule of law,
yeah.
And obviously there are certain negative values on the extremes or the fringes that are inconsistent with this. And I think it is totally fair to say that these values that actually enable and support diversity, that support a cohesion, social cohesion within a diverse society, I think is important. There's a reason why immigrants, families like my own family, come to liberal democratic countries like Australia and the US. And specifically, one of the main reasons is because we love these values. There are things that I cannot say out in public if I was still back in India, that I can say here. I can openly criticize the government, I can slam them. And not only will they not put me in jail, but I can do that within the political party that I'm technically a member of. And they won't even get rid of my membership. I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, you and I agree on that point. But you do realize, man, there's a growing segment of society in America. They actually will say we want freedom of speech, but they really do not. That they respect rule of law, but they're antithetical to it. That they uphold the Constitution, but they're willing to shred it. Just look at the hypocrisy of January 6th. I'm sure you can appreciate this and appreciate the irony of it. You literally had people saying that they were constitutionalists and that they were backing the police and that they backed the blue and that they are for the rule of law, committing an act of domestic terrorism against the US Capitol. And they're not, here's the thing, man, they're not a small segment anymore. They are a growing, powerful segment, and they're so strong that people that know better, who are in political power, are powerless because of their cowardly activity to actually call them out for who they are.
I'd actually argue that there's been a huge amount of criticism and of attacks against the people who stormed the Capitol. One of the interesting things was, I was in DC around that time, and I was out around midnight. I just left the office. I'd stayed back quite late. And I was worried because at the time, DC was rife with the National Guard. I was one of the only people on the street at the time. And to be honest, as a dark-skinned young man, being one of the only people out there in the middle of an area packed with National Guard troops was a bit intimidating. But I was treated so incredibly well, and I realized all of a sudden we've moved into this weird situation where in some ways we have almost, we're going towards the polar opposite of the Patriot Act era. You ask someone in the national security establishment what a domestic terrorist looks like today, and it's no longer a brown man with a beard. It's probably going to be a white guy with a MAGA hat on. Yeah. So it's interesting to see that flip. I think the majority of Americans, including people, in fact, who are Republican voters, see an issue with how that particular day was handled and how it ended up turning out. And it was.
Well, let me give you a stat. Are you aware of how many Republicans agree with the Capitol insurrection? Do you know?
Is it something like 40%?
49%. 49, damn near 50% of Republicans agree with what you and I recognize as a terrorist attack. That's today. It was at 38. It increased to 42. It was at 51 at one point, and it dropped to 49. You don't find that to be a real blow at democracy at its core. That damn near half of a political party believes that a terrorist attack against the United States government was justified.
I think it's a testament to the fact that you can have a functioning democracy, even at times of great weakness and great crisis, where we can have a frank discussion about these issues and start what is really a long conversation. Now, the thing is, if there are people out there who genuinely think that the election was a complete fraud and that storming the Capitol was justified because the whole thing was a fraud, then there is a wider conversation with these people that needs to happen, and that needs to be given the sunlight of day.
Man, they need to go to jail if they committed an act of terrorism. And I want to remind you, man, there's a whole lot of people felt like Al Gore got the election stolen from him. A whole lot of Democrats felt like Hillary Clinton got the election stolen from her. You know what they did not do? They did not commit an act of domestic terrorism against the United States government. Brother, I am flat out of time, man. It's been fun. I hope you come back.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a good show.
Absolutely.